All right, gang. Well, welcome back to Freedom Formula, where today I have a special guest. Michael here. And it's one of those things. Everybody's like, "Hey, should I send you a bio?" And I know you didn't do that. We chatted in person about this, but I distinctly remember the first time I got to meet you, and I was actually participating in a separate event that you were speaking at, and you just blew my mind the way you thought about money. So we're going to talk through like the way you think about this and everything. We typically do our 2 episode drop here, but stay tuned. Like, this is one of the coolest guys that I've gotten to hang out with in recent history. He's taught me so much and he's helped me open my brain so much where I am pretty smart. I'm good at what I do, but it's nice to be in rooms where like you're dumb with certain things and get to learn from somebody who's so great. I promise you guys on the other side of this, you will think about your money in general, borrowing, loans, mortgages, all the things so differently. And you're definitely going to want to find out more. But Michael, I appreciate you spending some time hopping on. I know we got to spend some time in Punta Cana together, just jamming on some of this stuff. I've been waiting for this. So really excited. And again, I appreciate the time that you're willing to spend here, man.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
So, going to jump right in, and so right behind you got RYU. So replace your university. And it's
Uh-huh.
a conglomeration of a couple of different, replace your insert things. Replace your mortgage is probably the one that you talk about most, the
Yep.
most known one, the one that I got to learn about you most, out of the gates. And it's interesting the way you think about money. And I remember some of the stories you shared and some of the differences you did, but I know obviously you weren't born with that knowledge. Like, it's not, you didn't pop out knowing like, hey, the entire
Yeah.
world thinks about this thing differently than they really should be. And it's something that's probably keeping them poor. So let's go back a little bit. Start like, who are you? Like, did you grow up, the multi-trillionaire that you are, just thinking about money differently? And where did this whole thing really start from? Where did it come from? What did you do?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town, Fairview, Tennessee. It's outside Nashville, probably about 40 minutes outside Nashville, west of Nashville. And when I first started, I wouldn't say understanding money, but started thinking about money. My mother, she grew up extremely poor. And people think that once they hear about my mother's story that I grew up rich, but it was the complete opposite. But she only had one job for almost 50 years, and that was working originally for a company called J.C. Bradford and Company. It was a stock brokerage firm. It eventually grew to the largest privately held stock brokerage firm in America. And she started out in the file room. Now, she was one of 7 kids. Father was a carpenter. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I know it was, back in the day, and you think, well, yeah, I guess they can make a living that way. No. I mean, when you got that many kids and that many mouths to feed on a carpenter's income and a stay-at-home mom, times were tough, really tough. And in fact, she tells me stories about them having an outhouse because they didn't have running water in the house. Now, she's not 120 years old. She's 74 years old. So you go back to the 50s, people had indoor plumbing and toilets and sinks and stuff, but she didn't because they were extremely poor. So when she got a chance to get a job, she got a job working in the file room for J.C. Bradford and Company. Now, let's kind of fast forward. She got an opportunity to be a junior partner with the company. A junior partner, and I'm just guesstimating here because my mom and dad are very similar to me. They're very private about their money. There's saying you can't hide money, but people don't know how much I make or how little I make. I don't make it publicly known because it's not about that. It's about impact. And they were the same way. But I'm assuming that she was making about 80,000. And then my father was in the freight business and got laid off. So he was somewhat, for some of my childhood, a stay-at-home father. Take me to school, take me to baseball practice and basketball practice and whatnot. Beat up the coach one time. That was cool. That's an interesting story. But anyways, it sounds like a lot of money. And don't get me wrong, it is in the 70s and 80s. $80,000 is a lot of money. However, as a junior partner, what they allowed her to do is to buy into the company. And to buy into the company, when they offered a point in the company, it was $40,000 cash. So you got 80,000 before taxes, and then every time it was offered, she made this commitment. Anytime they offer me a share in the company, I'm going to buy it because I see something down the road. She had amazing foresight and still does. So she would buy points in the company. at 40,000. So if you're just doing the math, 80,000 before taxes, after taxes, you're probably working with 60. After you put 40 grand of cash into something, you're working with 20. And I had an older brother as well. So I get on to my kids all the time because every time they need a new pair of shoes, I'm a bad parent, but they get a new pair of shoes. I had two pairs that would last me an entire year. My clean shoes, which were sneakers, I didn't have loafers or anything like that, and then my dirty pair that I played in. And to this day, when the kids come in from playing, I'll get their Crocs or whatever it is, and I'll get the Magic Eraser, and I'm cleaning their shoes. And that habit developed because when I was a little kid, I only had two pairs of shoes to work with. Now, people only think of the story of when I was well into my college years and off of the parents' payroll, that my family did really well. And they're like, "Oh, you grew up rich." Like, dude, where were you at in elementary, middle school, and high school? We didn't have anything. But we didn't know it. I mean, they're really good parents. We didn't know that times were tough. Christmas rolled around. Now looking back, you're like, okay, now there were some telltale signs, but one of the things that I learned from that is money was not the result of my
Yep.
joy. Whether I got a starter jacket because I was big into the Charlotte Hornets back then. Remember the starter jackets, the big puffy ones? I didn't get
Nice
those. So
windbreaker and everything like that back in the day.
I wasn't into that stuff, and I quickly connected the dots that money doesn't equal joy. That it's just a tool and it's a resource. So fast forward a little bit more. Every year she's buying points in the company. And this was my in between my sophomore and junior year in college. I was interning at Payne Weber. And the reason being is Payne Weber came along and bought out J.C. Bradford and Company, and they were a partnership. So she had every single year since the 80s been buying points in this company. So she had accumulated quite a few points. And Payne Weber was offering 10 to 15 times what she had paid per point to be bought out of that company. So it explodes. But then Payne Weber said, "Hey, we're going to keep you on." And then a couple months later, the Bank of Switzerland bought out Payne Weber and said, "Hey, we want to keep you on." So they made her director of North American operations, and her headquarters was in New York. So to me, that was a couple of things: discipline, foresight, some wisdom. Don't just think a couple steps ahead. Think long term. That was some things that really resonated with me. But yeah, I didn't grow up with money. It wasn't until I was in college and off payroll that my parents actually had a pot to piss in, so to speak. And I was already on my own dime as a broke college kid at that point. But yeah, that was the early years. Now I was an athlete. Every sport that the school would offer, I played, whether it was the right choice or not. I still did. So, like, and a good example is golf. You watch me play golf today, you're like, you played on the high school golf team? Like, there was only like five of us, and they had to have five people play. So it didn't matter how bad you were, you still got to play. But I excelled in football, baseball, and basketball. And basketball was eventually what took me into the next level in my college years. And it was good too, because as I was, one of the reasons why I tell you that story is that was really my path to college. It was either that or get out of high school, get a job, start earning some money, and pay for your own way to college, because they were in that accumulation phase. They were in the buying the points in the company phase, and they hadn't hit it big yet. So having a scholarship was very important to me. That was my only way to go to college. And my father recorded every high school game with a camcorder, and some of my middle school games too. Amazing parents. Like, even when I was in college and traveling all over the Southeast and Ohio and Virginia and West Virginia and whatnot, they rarely missed a game. And they were living in Fairview, Tennessee, and my college was in Charlotte, North Carolina. So they would rarely miss a game, but he filmed every game. And at the end of the year, we would put together a highlight tape, and this is on VHS back then. And then we would send them out to colleges, and then some colleges would write in. And I remember being that, 17-year-old that wanted to go hang out with buddies. And he's like, "No, you need to sit down tonight and respond to every single one of these letters." And we'd sit there, and this is before Chat GPT and all this, where you're handwriting stuff and, signing these letters and sending them back. And like, it'd be a privilege an honor to go to your school if you would entertain me being an athlete there, blah, blah, blah. So I eventually got a scholarship and go to college, majored in finance, ironically, and also went on to McCall School of Business, which was it was started by Hugh McCall. So the dean of Queens University was Billy Wireman. It was actually called Queens College back then. but now they're big time. They call themselves Queen's University. But he was really good friends with Hugh McCall, who's the founder of Bank of America. So McCall School of Business was a business school really to pump out employees for Bank of America, is the way I look at it. So it's the reason why I say it's ironic, because I look at those years in college, what my major was, and going to business school. You're like, okay, well, that's where you learn this. No, I learned the opposite. Well, now I'm a bit jaded when I look at college. I've got 5 boys, and back then it was like an honor to go to college. I think I was the first in my family to not go to college, but to finish. Um, and so, it was a big honor. Nowadays, I kind of look at it with a different perspective. Like, okay, it's good networking, but like if any of my 5 boys want to get in business, college isn't for you. It's just
Yeah.
not. I mean, if you want to be an employee, have at it. Go be somebody's servant and go to college and learn what you need to do to be a good employee. But if you want to run a business, we were just talking about this earlier. Today's only Tuesday, right? So yesterday, my business philosophy or business policy professor was also a professor at Harvard. He did not own a business. My macro and microeconomics teacher did not own a business. It's like all these people are sitting there telling you all these concepts and theories about business, but yet they don't own a business, or they wouldn't be in that classroom teaching other people. So yeah, I'm a bit jaded. Now, if my sons are like, hey, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer or CPA or something, yeah, fine, go to college. You want to get in the trade schools, that's another tangent we could talk about too, because I'm a huge believer that today's blue collar employees are going to be tomorrow's white collar salaries. You've got AI and all this advanced technology, and there's just a shortage in the labor market of mechanics, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, et cetera, people that know how to actually build and work with their hands. That's we went through this 15, 20-year generation of higher level education to get these executive salaries that are non-existent, and yet nobody was learning the trades. So that's my little side tangent on that. But yeah, my boys want to get in trade school. Absolutely champion that one. No student loan debt here in Tennessee. They get the first 2 years for free. So yeah, I'll champion that all day long. But if they want to get into business, then yeah, I got a seat for you. Sit right beside me for 10, 12 hours a day for the next 60 days, and that'll be your small little internship to learn how to run a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
But
there's so many people are like, hey, just college is still such a thing. And listen, like you said, I think college is a great networking place. It is a great place to learn some structure and some things outside of the norm, but it doesn't really prepare you for like literal life. It prepares you to go be an employee, do your 9 to 5, which I'm not saying is bad. It's not for me. It's not for you. It's not for people in our world for
right.
the most part. And, people listening in, there's definitely 9 to 5ers in there. And, so it's not a bad thing, but it also, like, the thing that I think school takes away from you, like the biggest thing is the ability to think outside that box and be a
Yeah.
problem solver is like the actual tangible asset that you miss out on by going to school and learning A plus B equals C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, critical thinking is very much missed in college. And it was after my senior year. I actually had some heart failures. But that's a totally side tangent on in college years. But I had some heart failure in college, and knew that okay, going the next level, professional, was probably not going to happen. One, I'm 6'3" and white. I could jump out of the gym like crazy, but yeah, it's still the cards are stacked against you. So I was like, okay, I came to reckon with that, and then I was like, okay, military. And I honestly, I think I got some bad advice. It could have been good advice, but they're like, okay, because of your medical record, there's no way that you're going to be able to get in the military. And I didn't want to get in the military to just be some type of water technician, right? And they're important, so don't take that the wrong way. But if I'm going to do something, I want to be elite. So, I grew up watching Charlie Sheen, Navy SEALs, stuff like that. I'm like, if I'm going to go to the military, that's the type of stuff I want to do. I want to be important. I want to do something really cool. But they were like, there's no way with your heart condition at the time that you could entertain something like that. So after I graduated, I had a buddy that graduated ahead of me Um, and he got in the mortgage industry. He worked for a company, and he's like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this, and I think you should take a look at it." I was like, "Not interested." I was like, "Dude, I don't know anything about mortgages." I was renting at the time, didn't know anything about buying homes, wasn't even on the thought of my mind. And then a second trip over to my apartment, he's like, "Check out these commissions checks." And I was like, "Dang, is that for the year?" He goes, "No, dude, that's for the month." I was like, "Whoa, okay, I'll figure it out. Get me an interview." So he got me an interview. And again, I didn't have any. Yes, I got the finances and stuff in college, but when you get into a field like that, especially in the mortgage industry, that's honestly a bad thing because now they're trying to teach you something so nuanced that they have to break you down and build you back up the right way. So I couldn't lean on that. And it was the senior vice president who was from Nigeria but raised in London, three-piece suits, multi-million-dollar earner a year. And I was like, I need to come up with something that will impress him. So just on the fly, I thought of this. It wasn't a whole lot of preparation. I was just like, I got to land this interview. And if I can land the interview and get the job, then I'll just figure the rest out on the fly. And as he's talking, I said, well, who's your top producer? What was the best hire you made last year? And he's like, right over there, pointed at an office and said, it's Natalie. Natalie's the top producer. I was like, okay, I can guarantee you this. If you hire me, I will crush her numbers. He's like, no way. I was like, yeah, I'm dead serious. I will crush her numbers. Now, did I actually believe that? No. I just wanted to land the job in the interview. Now, let's fast forward 10 months later. I'm doing my thing, get my feet wet, and I'm not even paying attention to the accolades and the numbers and all that. And this is like October of 2002 or 2001. And, there it was very bullpenish where you've got 100 loan officers in this one office building, and they had this big bullpen. It was like a big training facility. And what the senior vice president would do every morning is he'd come around and just throw objections at you. And you've got 120 people in there when it comes to underwriters, processors, and all that, and loan officers and senior managers and whatnot. So you're in front of 120 people, and he's throwing an objection at you, and you got to overcome an objection. So that's what we do every single morning. And this one morning in October, he kept throwing objections at me. I'm like, why are you picking on me, dude? Normally it's like one person, then he'll throw another one, another person, and so on. But he just kept doing it at me. I'm like, dude, he's picking on me. What did I do wrong? And then finally, he's like, all right, I wanted to highlight that Michael understands the stuff like the back of his hand. And, he had made a comment almost a year ago that if I hired him, he would be the best hire that the company had made. And we don't normally announce this until January, but he's so far ahead, nobody can come close to catching him. So we're going to go ahead and announce that he's this year's newcomer of the year. And he beat Natalie's numbers. I was like, oh, wow. I totally forgot about it, right? It's also something about faith, too. I don't know why it made me think of this, but, sometimes we think that God doesn't answer prayers. He just sometimes doesn't answer them right when you want him to answer them. You may have a prayer, and then 20 years later, you're like, oh, my goodness, he answered that prayer. But I didn't ask it right now. I asked it 20 years ago. But he is faithful. So anyways, all that to say is I totally forgot that I'd made this challenge or this comment, and he had reminded me of that when I received the award. And honestly, I thought I was doing God's work, helping people that dream of home ownership, getting them into homes. One of the things I was taught that is super ironic today is that HELOCs are like credit cards on your home, and credit cards are bad. Well, if you listen to Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey and all them, yeah, credit cards are actually bad for a lot of people, but it's not bad for everyone, right? It's bad for the uneducated. But I used to say that. And now looking back, I know why they trained us a certain way. Because if you're just refinancing the mortgage and you're not consolidating other debt, like a home equity line of credit, some credit cards and student loans, or car loans, then your volume is going to be here. And we got paid a percentage of volume. So the more you could pay off, the bigger the loans were and the more the commission checks were. And, the other thing I talk about is profits or commissions come from profits, and profits come from consumers overspending. So mortgage companies are highly, highly profitable. Did my stint there, rose through the ranks, eventually became a senior manager. I was not number one or number two, but I was number three in the company as far as senior manager. We're a pretty large company. We're the ninth largest lender in the country at the time. And that was in 2007. And it was like somebody had just pulled the brakes on the real estate market. Now, we kind of saw it probably 6 to 9 months before everybody else did because we're on the lending side. And it was the summer of 2007. Our office in Charlotte was doing about 500 loans a month, 500 to 600 loans a month. Fast forward 2 months, I bet we were doing 50. I mean, there was just no place to put them. The subprime market had completely dried up. Now, I say subprime because people are like, oh, man, you're one of the reasons why we had the meltdown. No, I mean, we were actually a legit company where if we did a loan, we had to pass what's called a net tangible benefit, where you had to reduce their payments, reduce their term, give them some cash. It had to be a financial benefit to them to do so. Now, that wasn't all the companies. There was a lot of companies out there that were, if you fogged up a mirror, great, you got a loan, I got a commission check. That wasn't us. But just if there's no secondary market, there's no place to put these. And just saw the writing on the wall. And sure enough, that year on my birthday, they filed bankruptcy and let everybody go, no severance. And I was like, oh my goodness. I had a little bit of a nest egg to last me, but I was a terrible steward of my money. You know, my wife was with the same company. She was doing really good. I was a senior manager. We just thought this was life for the rest of our
Yeah.
life, that we're going to make, anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 a year for the rest of our life, just working this gig. And maybe someday I'll move up to senior vice president and make even more money. So with that thought in mind, what do you think we were doing every time we got big checks coming in? I remember I bought an Escalade one time that I could have paid cash for. And I'm like, no, I'll just finance that too. Buy a four-wheeler. I'm going to finance that. I bought a motorcycle. I'm going to finance that. We had more cars than we had drivers. And, a house that was 4,200 square foot and there was only two of us. We didn't have any kids. Like, what are you going to do with all that? It was a great place to hang out and throw parties. But other than that, it was a complete waste. So terrible steward of our money. And when they went bankrupt, everybody else did. And it was almost like, and I don't want to blame anybody else because I take personal responsibility for this. But I remember some conversations where it's like, go buy a nice car, go buy this. And when I eventually became a senior manager, a little telltale sign where they were like, yeah, we want them to spend their money, because if they spend their money, they got to come back here and work just as hard to get it back. I'm like, dang, that's kind of dirty, but it worked for them. So they filed bankruptcy. I take an opportunity because I'm now on the pretty close to going bankrupt, which I eventually did the following year. I had a nest egg to live off of. I remember I was going to go headfirst into real estate. There was a golf course in Little Rock, Arkansas that I was going to buy. It was on 1,000 acres and going to develop the lots and build homes and sell all those homes. And we got it under contract for like $4.5 million back then, and it had already appraised for 16. We're like, worst case scenario, we could sell it for 10 and still make money. Well, no, because everybody was foreclosing. So as everybody's running out of the burning building, we're running into it buying real estate. Completely stupid. Again, I go back to my mother having amazing foresight, something that totally missed my DNA. So that was what I used a lot of my nest egg for, was investing in that project. And then it eventually got to the point where it was like, oh man, I got to move back home. So I did. Got back in the mortgage business with a different lender. And this was probably 9 months later. That previous company said, hey, we're resurrecting. We got money from a hedge fund. We're going to resurrect. We're going to be as big, if not bigger, than we previously were. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm just a lowly loan officer in the mortgage industry now. And nobody knows who I am or what I did with your company here in Nashville, Tennessee. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, yeah, I'll take that. And they offered me the job of director of operations for Nashville. And so I took that position and did the same thing I did from the previous stint. It rose through the ranks and became the number one branch in the company. But along the way, this hedge fund manager would stop in my office. He was located out of Connecticut, but his parents lived in Nashville. So anytime he would come into town to visit his parents, he would come in to check up on his money, making sure it was being spent right. So we'd go through numbers and financials and stuff. And it was one visit because I remember the CEO was like, listen, I want you to take this very seriously anytime he comes into town. He's worth a lot of money, Michael, like a lot, like 600 or $700 million. He's like, this is where we got our 25, $35 million to resurrect. So please don't embarrass the company. I'm probably 30 at the time, 31. And I'm like, I'm good. One, I'm not impressed by money. Dude puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. So I'm just going to treat him like a human being, not like the Pope. So that's what I did. And we kind of had somewhat of, I wouldn't say a friendship, but an association. In one meeting, I said, hey, I got an idea. I got a proposal. Birds of a feather flock together. I want to be in your shoes one day. Not so much for the money. And maybe back then it was more about money than it was impact. Over the years, that has definitely molded to a different position. But I want to be where you're at. So if you could introduce me to your sphere of influence, I want to know what you know and be around the people that you're around so that I can attract the same types of things and success that you have. And I said, and I can be the mortgage lender for your buddies. And that's when he laughed. He's like, we don't do mortgages. And I was like, okay. I kind of figured that you pay cash for everything. And I had an answer for that. It's called lost opportunity cost. Like, you shouldn't pay cash for all that because now your cash isn't making money for you somewhere else. He's like, no, 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 no. He's like, we don't pay cash. Think about it, Michael. I own a hedge fund. We are the kings of leveraging other people's money. He's like, we just don't use mortgages. And this is what he hit me with. He said, mortgages are financial crack to middle America. The poor can't afford them and the rich don't use them. Understood the poor part because I wasn't getting poor people financed. They didn't qualify. This is post 2008 when you actually had to qualify. You had to verify with pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns. The government came out with this crazy idea of the ability to repay a loan. That's which makes sense. It's common sense, but that wasn't the case previous to 2008. So I knew I wasn't getting poor people financed. But what really intrigued me was rich people. You're still leveraging other people's money, but it's not a mortgage. How does that work? And he said, I'll give you a really prime example. He said, home equity lines of credit. He said, we utilize home equity. And remember what I was taught? Home equity lines of credit are like credit cards. And credit cards are bad, right? It's all this sales psychology. And I mean, we literally had a script where every word was thought out. The tonality of that word was thought out. I mean, it was a super professional place, and they did a good job training people. But the minute somebody would think outside the box, they became a threat to that company, and it was like a cult. Like they needed to eliminate you. And so when he shared this with me, that basically I was a financial dope dealer, I went down this rabbit hole, as I do a lot of things, unfortunately. But I went down this rabbit hole of like, this doesn't feel good. I'm thinking that I'm doing honest, good work. And this guy just told me that I'm doling out financial crack to middle America. And so I investigated for a year and a half, hired a CPA and an actuary, and actually one of my business partners to this day, Matt Workman, to really try to poke holes in this. And the more we tried to poke holes in it, the more we realized he was right for the right people, not for everybody. And then I had this crazy idea that, after the bankruptcy, when I actually qualified for a mortgage now, I was like, I'm going to close on a mortgage. And then 6 months later, I'm going to refinance the entire thing into a home equity line of credit. I'm going to attempt what this guy's telling me. And I want to be this guinea pig to test this theory out. So my wife and I did. She thought I was crazy. I was like, I want to refinance the whole thing. It's going to go into a variable rate line of credit. And she's like, oh my gosh, just don't lose this house too. Because now we've got 2 kids. And I was like, no, I got us. I think I've looked at this 7 different ways from Sunday, and I think this makes sense for us. So I did. It took a lot of attempts from different bankers and credit unions because they thought I was crazy too. And in fact, even to this day, you talk to a banker about what we do, they're like, you're nuts. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's because they don't peel the onion back a couple layers deep to understand the simple 3rd grade math of it. But we did, and it took us 3.5 years. And I wasn't making gangster money. I was making good money in the mortgage industry. I've always made good money in the mortgage industry, but nothing like, I wasn't making like $60,000, $100,000 a month type stuff. We're talking like $15,000 to $25,000 a month. And I was able to pay our home off in 3.5 years. Now, that's not 15, 20, that's 15, 25 gross before taxes. And I've also got other expenses. I've got car loans and kids and Christmas and all this stuff. So, it wasn't like we were, heading to Turks and Caicos every other month to vacation. But we were able to pay our home off in 3.5 years, and I maintained liquidity. So even though I had paid it off, I still had access to $350,000 line of credit at the time. So I'm like, dang, this actually works. And then I was like, all right, I need to start telling my family and friends. Well, those are the first ones to not go to, because I don't know what it is about family and friends, but they're like, no way, no way. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I was being interviewed. I had left that company and became a senior vice president for a federal bank. And I was being interviewed. I forget what the magazine was, but anyways, the premise of the interview was, how do you grow this mortgage empire? How do you recruit? How do you grow branches? What makes the most sense as far as the ratio of loan officers to loan officers assistants, and get loans closed quickly? What's your secret recipe? There is no secret recipe in the mortgage industry. There's nothing new under the sun. In fact, that was his last question. So it was an hour-long interview, and the first 45 minutes is very mundane. Like it's worse than watching paint dry. It's the mortgage industry. You're talking math, numbers, and all this stuff. Nobody in the real world really cares about it. And he hit me with a question. He's like, "There's probably nothing new under the sun, but if there is there something out there that people don't know that they should, that would provide them a lot of financial benefit?" And I'm like, "Dang, this is not self-serving at all. I'm actually shooting myself in the foot." But I was like, "Whatever. I'll just explain it. Maybe no one's going to read this anyways." And I said, "I don't actually consume mortgages." He's like, "What?" I was like, "No, I refinanced my entire mortgage into a line of credit, and I use it like a checking account. Me and my wife paid our home off in 3.5 years." And yeah, not everybody can do it, but of the ones that are cash flow positive, they should 100% do it. And if they do so, it's a lot easier to get your home paid off and maintain liquidity. And I think more people should be doing it. But yeah, I'm a mortgage originator, and I don't consume the product. I'm like the quintessential dope dealer, right? You don't test your
Yeah.
own product, right? I was completely off of it. And he called me after the fact. He's like, a couple things I noticed. One, first 45 minutes was stupid boring. Nobody's going to listen to that. But the last 15 minutes was awesome value. And he said, and I also noticed your energy level was different. Like, I could tell that you weren't super interested in what you were talking about for the first 45 minutes, but you were very passionate about the last 15. And he's like a business consultant. He's like, you need to build a business around that. I was like, I don't know how to do it. I've worked for everybody my entire life. I don't know how to do that. He's like, well, come down to Boca Raton for a while. It was about a week. And he's like, and I'll get you set up. And it wasn't cheap. We actually put that on a credit card, my wife's credit card too. And she's like, please, please, please don't burn us. And I was like, I think he's right. I think I got this. And I trusted my gut, and I did. So once I got back, I had an entire business plan and started mapping everything out and executing. And within 90 days, I completely abandoned the mortgage industry forever. Hopefully I never have to go back to it. Abandoned it forever. And I've been doing this consulting business ever since. In 90 days, I was able to completely replace the income I was making on the mortgage side, and now, provide a better life for my family, teaching what is the truth. And it's funny because people look at this as it's some type of new concept, that's something that I came up with. And I give credit that I first heard about it from a hedge fund billionaire. He's a billionaire now. He wasn't then, but he can't even take credit for it. This is hundreds of years old, and people don't realize that if they just, especially now with AI, just do some simple search of when was the 30-year mortgage created? 1933. Okay, what did they do before then? Well, it was still called a mortgage, but it didn't look like a mortgage. It was an interest only loan. Sound familiar? It sounds like a line of credit. And it was also a way that you were somewhat liquid. You could store your money there, because people back then, they didn't trust the banks. Prior to 1913, a mortgage was a two-way street. You could put money in and out freely, 24. I would say 24/7. But you could walk down to the bank that day and say, "Hey, I need, 10 grand loan. I've got a $200,000 farm that I only owe 100 on," and they're like, "Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. And you've always made your payments. Here's 10 grand. Take it today." Take the 10 grand, go buy farm equipment, cultivate more crop, make 20,000 in profit. Guess what? You just put the 20 grand right back into the mortgage for safekeeping, because they didn't trust putting it under the mattress, because back then we didn't have like Arlo and Ring cameras and stuff like that. As far as home security, you had a good old fashioned shotgun. So they didn't like storing it under the mattress in case they were gone on their horse and buggy one day. And they also didn't trust the banks, because banks were failing right and left. So what did they do? They stored it in the mortgage. So after 1913, once you get the modern day mortgage that was eventually consummated in 1933, um, that's what changed the lending landscape forever in this country, where people now think it's normal to consume a closed in, amortized debt installment loan like a mortgage versus what we did for hundreds of years. And, your viewers are probably not my viewers. And if any of them are, they're like, yeah, he says this all the time. But a lot of people don't know this. Mortgage is Old French for death pledge. That's what it translates to. It's two words, mort, engage. Mort is referring to mortality. Gage is a contract. So the word literally translates to death pledge. And you wonder why the average American doesn't pay off one home in 30 years. You think, well, why is that? It's a 30-year term. Surely they paid off in 30 years. They have to. No, because we refinance. We chase rates. We chase access to more equity, and we constantly start that clock all over again. I also could not teach this in other countries like Australia, South Africa, parts of the United Kingdom, Brazil. They learn this stuff in high school. This is finance 101 in high school. But in America, we're the highest GDP, the biggest economy in the world. And I just think that we can afford to get extorted. So therefore we are. And that they use a mortgage to prop up banks and lenders. That's kind of reverse a little bit. The modern day mortgage wasn't created for more interest. It was created for more deposits. Because again, what did they look at what the average American was doing? Where were they storing their cash? In their mortgage, because it was semi-liquid. Okay. Well, we need to close that loophole and force them to deposit money in our coffers in the form of checking and savings accounts. So that's what they did. They made a mortgage a closed-end product in 1933, and they threw us a bone and said, well, we'll make it a 30-year term instead of a 15 or a 10-year term. Well, the longer you stretch out debt, the more interest you pay. That was the byproduct. That people look at it and think, okay, well, that was just their attempt to get access to more interest income. No, their number one priority was to get access to our cash in the form of checking and savings accounts. The byproduct and the cherry on top was, oh, well, now you're actually paying for two homes, one for the bank and one for you in that particular order. Because if people truly understand an amortization schedule, the first 5 years is basically interest only payments. You're not attacking principal more than you are interest until 18 and a half years in. So you're almost 20 years into a 30-year mortgage before your payments are affecting more principal than it is interest. So the bank gets the large majority of their profits on the front end, and you pay for their home first, then you start paying off your home. In a line of credit, it's the opposite. When money goes in, it goes to principal first and interest last. In a mortgage, it goes to interest first and then principal last. So I've kind of went on a tangent. You asked one question and it took me
You're good.
down.
No, it's, I think this is a good highlight of, where you came from and where this all started. Right. And again, I remember the first time I met you, I just got my, butt beat into the ground for 2 days from our buddy Nate, and just, sitting in there and it's like, oh, this guy's going to come in and talk numbers. How fun is this really going to be? Thankfully, I enjoy numbers, and you showed up, and I was like, for the next hour, I just couldn't write fast enough. And it wasn't necessarily new. It was just different. And that's the big thing that I remember, so gonna put a close to this episode here. You guys listening in, watching in here. This is Michael. He's a rock star. Michael, where can people find you? Social media, like where's the best place to go if they want to go learn and just kind of follow you and just kind of poke around a little bit about what you got going on in your world?
Yeah, we have tons of free information on YouTube. Replace Your University is the handle on YouTube. You got Instagram as well, but our website, anybody can log on as a free user of our website, and we have tons of free information on there as well. So I encourage anybody that is kind of looking at this, because you know how it is. You're into social media too, and you've got tons of followers and whatnot. And I can't help but read the comments. I try to listen to Joe Rogan. Not that he and I are friends, or we've never even communicated, but I listen to his podcast. He says, stop reading the comments. So I feel like he's speaking to me, but I do. I read the comments, and it's like, I can tell, when you're hating on social media, that you've never consumed an ounce of the information that I provide for free. Because if you did, you'd be like, you know what, this is starting to make a lot of sense. I would like to investigate this further. So that's what we do, is we provide tons of information. the bare bones math. We show the disclosures that are given to you by the lenders and the mortgages, whether it's a loan estimate, the truth in lending. We actually back it up with what they are telling you. So if you don't believe us, at least believe the people you're borrowing money from, because the government's forcing them to tell you why you're getting screwed. So we back it up with all that. Then we also show you the disclosures and the math behind the opposite strategy. And then let people make a decision from there. But yes, replaceuniversity.com's website. You go to YouTube is where we got tons of information for, I don't know, 10 plus years on there. So countless videos on there of all the information. So
Amazing. Well, thank you. You guys need to go follow Michael and go do some research. I promise you, on the other side of a little bit of time spent, you're gonna have to keep diving deeper into this world, and it's gonna unlock a whole new thing that you never really knew existed. So, thanks again for watching, guys.